It started on a random evening when I was cleaning out my parents' attic. I wasn't doing anything special, just organizing boxes, tossing out old junk. My parents had recently moved, and I guess I was tasked with getting rid of stuff they didn't need. It's not something I usually enjoy doing, but something about that night felt different. It was a strange feeling, like something was pulling me to the back of the attic, to a dusty box that I hadn't noticed before. This box was old, the kind of box you might expect to find old letters, clothes, or family keepsakes in. But what caught my eye was a worn-out photo album that had somehow slipped to the back. I remember brushing the dust off it and opening it up. At first, it was like any other family album, pictures of birthday parties, vacations, and family gatherings. But then I saw a photo that made my heart stop. It was a picture of my parents, me, and a young boy I didn't recognize. The boy had the same dark hair as me, and he looked so familiar, yet I had no recollection of ever meeting him. I stared at the picture, trying to place him, but nothing came to mind. I flipped through more pages, hoping to find more pictures of this mystery kid, but there were only a few others scattered throughout the album. It was as if he had always been there, but I had never known about him. My confusion only deepened as I found more of these photos in the album. Sometimes he was with me, and sometimes just with my parents. In one, he was even standing next to me on my 8th birthday, an event I had clear memories of. But in all my memories, this boy wasn't there. I could feel my pulse quicken. I'd never seen this kid before. I had never heard my parents mention him, not once in all my life. I could feel the weight of the silence in that attic, a growing sense of unease creeping up my spine. I had to know more. That night after dinner, I confronted my parents. I showed them the photo and asked who the boy was. My mom looked at it for a second before quickly turning her face away, her eyes darting to my dad, who had gone pale. My dad, who was always calm and collected, suddenly looked uneasy. He cleared his throat and said, "That's not possible, son. There must be some mistake. We don't know who that is." I didn't believe them. I insisted, showing them more pictures of the boy, pointing out the unmistakable resemblance to me. But they continued to deny it, almost too quickly, too firmly. It was as if they were trying too hard to convince me. Feeling unsettled but determined, I decided to do some digging on my own. The next few days were a blur of internet searches, calls to distant relatives, and asking around. But no one had ever heard of this mystery sibling. No one knew anything. It was like he had never existed. But that's when things started to get weird. The first incident was subtle, almost nothing. I woke up one night, feeling the strangest sense of déjà vu, like I had forgotten something important. When I went downstairs to the kitchen to get a drink, I noticed a picture frame on the counter that I had never seen before. It was a picture of me, my parents, and the mystery boy. But what stood out was the fact that the frame wasn't where it had been just hours ago when I went to bed. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I had just been half asleep. But then, I began noticing more things out of place. Photos that hadn't been there before, things moving on their own, lights flickering at odd times, and the nightmares started. Every night I dreamed of that boy. In my dreams, he was always standing just outside my room, staring at me, his expression blank and cold. And then one night, he spoke. "You don't remember me, do you?" I woke up in a cold sweat. I felt like something was pulling at me, forcing me to remember, to face whatever had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents were hiding something. I knew I had to confront them again. That's when I found the second photo. It was tucked into the back of a drawer in my parents' room. It was a photograph of the mystery boy, but this time there was something different. He wasn't smiling like in the other pictures. His eyes were wide, almost hollow, and his skin was pale, more like a corpse than a child. Behind him, there was a shadow. No, not a shadow, but a figure. A figure with no face. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I immediately showed the photo to my parents, but this time they didn't even try to deny it. My mom started crying, her voice shaking as she whispered, "We tried to forget him, but he wouldn't let us." My dad went silent, avoiding my gaze. I demanded to know who he was. My parents finally broke down and told me the truth, something they had kept from me for years. The boy in the photo had been my older brother. His name was Caleb. But there was something wrong with Caleb. He wasn't like other kids. As he grew older, he became increasingly withdrawn and distant. He began to act strangely. Sometimes he would speak to people who weren't there, or laugh for no reason at all. My parents tried everything: doctors, therapists, even spiritual healers, but nothing worked. And then, one day, Caleb just disappeared. They never found him. They never spoke of him again. They moved on, and over time, they erased all traces of him from our lives, burning pictures, changing stories, and pretending as if Caleb had never existed. I had no memory of him because my parents had made sure of it. They had erased him, erased everything. But now it seemed like he was back. As soon as my parents told me the truth, the atmosphere in the house grew colder. The air felt thick, heavy, like something was watching me from every corner. The strange occurrences escalated quickly. Objects started to move on their own, sometimes a chair scraping across the floor, other times a door creaking open when no one was there. Then came the voice. The same voice from my dreams, except now it was in my waking life. Soft, just barely audible, whispering, "You took my place." I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up my things and went to stay at a friend's house, but even then, the whispers followed me. I never saw Caleb again, but the nightmares didn't stop. I was left with the haunting realization that my family had erased a part of their past, and now that part was coming back to haunt me. If you ever come across something your family doesn't want you to find, something that doesn't make sense, that they refuse to explain, be careful. Some things are better left forgotten, because once you know the truth, it's already too late.